I'm Janet Nodar. I'm the Senior Editor for Project and Breakbulk Cargo with the Journal of Commerce, and I'm the Chair of the Breakbulk and Project Cargo Conference of the Journal of Commerce. I'm happy to be here today with you for our 411 session on contracting in the project logistics supply chain. I'm talking with Frank Schroeder, who is the Director of Supply Chain with CB&I Storage Solutions, a McDermott company. McDermott is an international engineering, procurement, and construction company, or EPC, that has a focus on oil and gas projects. Frank, can you give our students just a quick description of what you do?
Yeah, certainly. Hi, Janet, and thanks for inviting me to participate in the session today.
Of course.
So the supply chain group is primarily the primary project support group in charge of procurement, logistics, and administration. And I'm currently focusing on the administration part of the supply chain, which is handling the vendor management, compliance, systems, logistics, and procurement. In vendor management, I focus on integrating new suppliers and subcontractors into the established pool of vendors. In procurement, I manage the procurement card process, and logistics, I help with export and import security and customs clearances.
Okay. All right. So today, Frank is going to give us the 411 on what in real life is an extremely complex topic, the two primary types of contracts, lump sum and reimbursable, which is also called cost plus. These are what contractors negotiate with their clients. These have very important effects on how projects unfold, including how project logistics decisions are made. My goal is for you to grasp basic concepts and be able to make better sense of more complex conversations when you come across them. So the first thing to do is define our terms. For this discussion, client refers to the project owners, the companies or entities who want an energy or a manufacturing or industrial project built. The contractors are the engineering companies, the EPCs, that design and procure for, which means buy the materials and components for, and build these complex projects. So the client could be international oil company, it could be a country in need of an LNG, a natural gas loading terminal, for example. It could be a city or a county looking for water, oil, or gas storage facilities. You know, there's many different types of projects that could be under discussion. The projects we are talking about are big, complex construction sites, offshore oil wells, LNG plants, petrochemical plants, things like that. They cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and it typically takes many months, like 2 years, even longer, sometimes a lot longer, to get a project from idea to actual production or being in place. So the supply chain management involved in building these types of projects is extremely complex. It includes procuring or ordering the machinery or steel and other equipment, all kinds of stuff that will be used in construction. These items will be sourced from all over the world. The project components have to be bought or manufactured, or sometimes they have to be shipped to a secondary place for more manufacturing or assembly. And then everything has to arrive in order, on time, and on budget at the final destination, the place where construction takes place. So getting all these tasks done is pretty complicated. And as you may imagine, quite often things do not arrive in order, on time, or within budget. That does happen. So the type of contract decided on between the, not really that funny, but it is, the type of contract decided on between the contractor and the client at the beginning of the project is very important when it comes to decision making about project procurement, subcontracting, and logistics, among many other things. It's also extremely important when you have to figure out what to do or who pays for what when things do not go strictly according to plan. Okay, Frank, so I think that sets the stage. You're the contractor. Your company wants to be picked to build a big project for a client, if you can do it for a reasonable margin or profit, that is. The clients put out a bid document, a request for proposals for building a big project. They like your proposal. They want to hire you. What are the two basic types of contracts that you would be negotiating? You might be negotiating for such a project, and how are they different?
Well, as you mentioned, there are two basic types of project contracts. One being a reimbursable or cost plus, and the other one being the lump sum contract. The reimbursable or cost plus contract basically is an agreement with a client to invoice all parts and components needed for the project at cost, plus the specified amount of construction and services such as engineering, procurement, logistics, and profit. So those are fixed on top. One of the main reasons for engaging in a reimbursable contract is the lack of detail and or possibly a client requirement in the bid document. The fewer details that there are available at the time of bidding, the more likely it is for the contractor to prefer a reimbursable contract. That's simply because the less you know, the more risk you have.
Right.
So on a reimbursable project, the client does sometimes dictate what materials or components to buy and from which manufacturer. That could be a reason why they would want a reimbursable contract, sorry. And then they would provide an AVL or improved vendor list to the contractors. So these are companies that they have done business with in the past, and so the client likes to have their materials and or equipment used for that construction. So the contractor will use that AVL and will execute the buying of the material and handle the logistics if that's part of the sales contract. And any money that was spent purchasing the material is billed back to the client at the same cost. Construction, engineering, and other services are either billed at a fixed price or based on an hourly rate or with an estimated man-hour budget. Meaning, we think that this is going to take 1,000 man-hours to do engineering and so forth. So the profit on a reimbursable is usually fixed for the contractor unless the scope of work changes, which is how the project is being handled.
Okay, so scope of work, that means the tasks or the jobs outlined in the original bid. And if these change, then do you renegotiate your agreement?
Well, the scope of work is the description of in the contract that identifies what the contractor is required to do to fulfill the contract.
Okay.
However, the change orders don't result in renegotiation of the agreement. Once awarded, the scope of work is fixed. And the change orders would only enhance or revise portions of the contract that kind of go away from the original scope. So it's an additional or a change of the scope that was originally agreed upon. In regards to the lump sum project, that's based on a single quota price for the entire scope of the project as it exists in the planning phase.
This is the second kind of contract, right?
That's the second kind of contract.
Type number 2. Okay.
Correct. And the lump sum project bid document contains, enough information for the contractor to be able to properly plan the work and estimate the cost for building it. And that's the big scope. The reason why what I said earlier, if there's not enough information, the risk for the contractor is way too large because they don't really know what they're dealing with. So, but if that is clearly defined, then a lump sum project is great because it then depends on the contractor's supply chain group to possibly lower the cost that was originally estimated and thereby increase the profit that was initially assumed to come out of the project.
Okay.
So having said that, the proper bidding of the project is extremely important since the material fluctuations directly affect the contractor's ability to make a profit. And so if you didn't estimate properly, obviously, it goes against your bottom line directly. Changes to an agreed lump sum price are only accepted by the client if the scope of the project changes from the original scope. So if the client states, okay, now we don't want this structure painted blue anymore, we want this painted red. Well, we've already purchased the blue paint, and now a change order would have to be made by or issued by the client saying, well, we've changed our mind, here's the new scope, and the additional cost is accepted.
All right. Okay, so who makes the decision on whether to go with reimbursable or lump sum bids, or a bid for a project?
So it's both the contractor and the client. The contractor, as I mentioned earlier, is basically going to be deciding on a lump sum if they have enough information, mm-hmm. and they have a calculatable risk that they feel that they can manage. Okay. So they would prefer to go with a lump sum. If the scope of work is not 100% clear, then the contractor would prefer using the cost plus. So it is more or less a negotiation between the client and the contractor as to which type of contract ends up being the underlying contract for the project. For those reasons, the other reason for the client to want to have a lump sum, a reimbursable, would be, as I mentioned earlier, that they would want only their vendors to be used to supply the materials and the equipment. But ultimately, to answer the question, is the decision is made by during the negotiations of the project and decided on both sides which one they prefer to do, and then they try to agree upon that.
What are some of the main cost components that influence a contractor's decision to bid lump sum or reimbursable?
So I would say that there's probably three major influencing aspects or decisions on how to quote. One most certainly is the material cost. Material cost is always the highest cost of the supply chain portion, sometimes even the highest cost of the project, if depending on how much manufacturing has to be done in construction. So the material cost obviously fluctuates wildly but within a short time frame. Fluctuating prices can be caused by raw material availability changes, like we have had this last year during the COVID crisis and other things. So it depends on availability, general pricing, geopolitical changes in that country of origin, environmental changes, and man-made disasters, like I said, the COVID crisis. As an example, I could tell you, like, for example, stainless steel, it increased significantly last year due to the price of nickel, which is one of the components in stainless steel, and that was because there was a scare of not enough nickel being available, and because of the explosion of electric cars which use nickel in their batteries, it was assumed that there wouldn't be enough nickel for other industries, such as the steel industry, to build. So causing the price of nickel to skyrocket, and with it, the stainless steel price. It's crazy how little things can change things that, can change material costs that much. But the other thing, of course, global pandemic resulted in significant price changes for materials, and so do regime changes and other things. So material cost, big part of what influences the decision on how to quote. Another decision is duties and taxes. So political and trade relationships between countries change all the time, and they can move between friendly cooperation and a flourishing trade to a Cold War relationship and trade wars. Right now the U.S. is in the middle of a trade war with China. Duties and taxes between friendly countries, are generally low because they want to enhance the trade between the two countries. Although if the political tensions are there, then you have generally higher taxes and duties that are the result of that. And you also have duties and taxes changing because of other things, not necessarily political aspects, but they can change because materials are defined as being dumped, meaning imported in a great amount for a very low price that is destructive or disruptive to the local industry. Such as, for example, again, steel. So there are lots of taxes and duties and special increases on steels from mass producers like China and other places that increase the cost that is usually lower than the domestic steel to equalize those two cost points. Getting companies to buy domestic rather than foreign. The third.
Did we just clarify just for a second? Okay, so it can be difficult to plan for these things. You don't know if they're going to happen. They can take you by surprise while you're planning your project. And if you have a lump sum contract, you have much less recourse for going back to your client and saying, "Oh, this steel is costing me 5 times as much as I expected." If you have a lump sum contract, you may not be able. You're stuck with that price, right? You have to pay for it.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Now there is the smart contract negotiator includes paragraphs in there to hopefully offset that. So okay. Generally we would have something in the contract that would state, okay, if the price increases unexpectedly by so and so many percent, we have to talk about this. We have to renegotiate. So, and the clients are generally okay with that because they understand, the situation. So, but smaller fluctuations they're your problem.
Okay.
Yeah. So right. You can't help it. And sometimes the client won't accept an exception clause, and then your risk obviously goes higher. But in general, for large scale mega projects, they do. Okay. The third item I would say that influences whether or not you want to, which contract you want to use is the project duration. Projects are generally time driven because the quicker the project is completed, the faster the client can start to recover the investment. If it's an LNG plant, if it goes online, they can sell the gas and so forth. It's money coming back in for what they've dished out to build the plant. Uh-huh. So if you're, as a contractor, ahead of the schedule, that can result in bonuses that were pre-agreed. But if you fall behind for whatever reason, you can't get material that you need or other reasons, weather and so forth. Well, weather is another whole different story. But then that leads to potentially liquidated damages, which are penalties for finishing late after the agreed time that the project is supposed to be done. Uh-huh. So these three, the material cost, the duties and taxes, and how quick you can finish a project, they are very important components for especially the contractor to decide which way do I want to go. Do I want to go lump sum or do I want to go reimbursable?
Yeah, and it's easy to understand that how much the risk increases under the lump sum in terms of not unpredictable cost changes, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you have to budget for that, or you have to have some kind of recourse if you possibly can. What happens if costs are a lot cheaper than you expected when you signed your contract? What happens if steel prices go down?
Well, in a reimbursable contract, the risk of price fluctuation for materials and equipment is on the client. So they would directly benefit from a reduced price, right?
It's a reimbursable contract. Okay, for a lump sum?
For a lump sum, it's the contractor is happy because they just increased their profit margin a little bit.
So if you find a better price than you expected to originally, that would increase your margin as a contractor.
Yes, theoretically, yes. It's not that easy because obviously,
no, sure it's not.
You're dealing, especially in projects, you're mostly dealing with specialty made equipment, and it's not off the shelf. So, once fabrication for components has started, you're locked in, right? But if for items that are off the shelf, that most definitely is something that you can quickly change if the material meets the criteria of the engineering.
Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. So here we were talking about the risk. Who carries the risk for price fluctuation? Under reimbursable, it's with the client, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And let's see. You mentioned duties and taxes can have a profound effect on project cost. Here again, the question is, how do you account for these variable costs in a lump sum contract, and how are they addressed in a reimbursable contract?
Well, it takes a lot of research, and preferably knowledge and experience. You have to basically, what you're going to buy. The composition of the steel. Let's say I'll go back to steel because that's for what we do. That's a majority material that we purchase. And because that's how we construct the tanks, and so you would then need to investigate and check the tariffs. What is the regular duty rate? Are there any preferences for the country of origin that the steel is coming from? Or are there penalties? Something I mentioned, just a little bit. There are things called anti-dumping, and that those are price. Those are more taxes than duties, and they're increases that customs imposes on certain steel from certain countries in order to equalize the cost of it to the local market. So the problem with it is this is a very this can also change because especially things extra additional taxes and duties such as anti-dumping, they don't stay the same. They fluctuate depending on the reassessment by the government of the situation. And so you really need to be very certain of what situation and what classification you're using, and that allows you to pre-estimate the duties and taxes you're going to face when the material is being imported. So. Long explanation. Summary is you have to really research this well and do a proper estimate of the expected duties and taxes in order to be safe with your price.
And I just want to reiterate again, when you're procuring, when you're buying things to build these projects, the stuff comes from all over the world. If you're importing into the U.S., so that's a big part of how your decision making it unfolds. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not only price that determines whether you want to buy from Korea or China or the US or Europe. It also depends on, again, back to the steel, which mill makes the material that you're looking for,
Right.
the grade and the type of material in the size that you want. Isn't made by every mill everywhere. So you also have to kind of field the market, who produces this material that we need, and then you do the price comparison based on, okay, so these are the players or these are the suppliers that are available, and then you go and do the landed cost comparison, which is all cost involved in buying the steel, transporting it to where it needs to go, duties, taxes, everything together, to have an apples to apples comparison.
Okay. Very complicated and all part of figuring out your pricing, right?
Yep.
So, okay. So you mentioned the other day when we were talking that the movement of project cargo, we were talking the other day that from your perspective, the cost of some specialized transport, even if it's very high, sometimes millions of dollars, I'm talking, I guess, ocean transport, even if it's very high, that can fade in significance against the cost of a failed or delayed project. What makes this true? And is this consideration also part of the lump sum reimbursable decision making?
Yeah, absolutely. Because transportation and especially movement of project cargo, which is usually oversized or extra heavy, is not only tied to the price of the transport, but the time and place of delivery. So you can. We're not the betting kind in the project.
Betting kind, is that what you said?
The betting kind, right? So
not gamblers.
The gambler. So if one company offers you, well, we can get your 1 million ton transformer from Rotterdam to Houston for $200,000, and three other companies will say, well, it'll cost you $1.5 million. You might want to, reassess who you're going to go with. So
the 200,000 one might be a little too good to be believed. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. A little bit too good to be true. And of course, when that happens, or if just simple accidents happen, or the environmental aspects take place, something happens there that changes a project transport of a large oversized cargo. It makes a big difference. So when you compare your who will be able to guaranteed deliver that particular piece that we need, or the pieces on time and without any damages, and in the right form, versus the at a certain price versus the cost of non-delivery, and the cost of non-delivery or non-performance can be enormous, because if you're building a project, it's you kind of think of it as like a stack of pancakes, right? You have to build it up from the ground. It doesn't. So you have to have start with something, build that out, and then the next thing can come on top. Well, if you're missing that next thing because the delivery is late, you are holding up the entire project.
You can't put anything else up on top.
That's right, because you can't put anything else on top. You can't continue with it. You basically have a work stoppage. And at that point, then you're looking at liquidated damages, because you're possibly going to deliver the project too late. And LDs can be from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. And so that can rack up very, very quickly if that particular piece is not there. So you want to make sure that whoever you use or whatever method you use to deliver a project cargo is the focus is on getting it there in one piece on time. And price is certainly important, but at that point, secondary, if you are ultimately facing liquidated damages that could offset the saved money very quickly.
I understand. All right. So, all right. One last question. What do you do when you have delays or problems that are caused not by you? It's not your fault. It's the pandemic. It's something like that. What happens then? So your project is late. Your project is delayed, but it's because everything's shut down because of the pandemic.
Yeah. You basically go in the mode of dealing with a situation and finding a solution. It doesn't matter at that point, whose fault, why, why did this happen, this, that, and so forth. You deal with the situation, okay. And being prepared for such a situation is very important, obviously. So plan Bs are not a good thing or something that you might want to think about. They are essential, right? You don't go into a project without having a plan B, because otherwise, if something happens, and that's just the nature of things do happen, especially in transportation, you have to be prepared to deal with it. So now, when you're talking pandemic, it's very difficult to be prepared for something like a pandemic. Nobody really was, which is why we've had so many issues, of course. But still, proper planning and risk evaluation at the bidding stage is huge. And having a plan B and being hopefully able to by step and keep the delay or the problem at a minimum. So writing a good contract is really important. One that covers unexpected scenarios and keeping the contractor's risk exposure limited. But making sure that you have all your ducks in order and a good plan that you then also exercise is really the main remedy for something that unexpected that happens.
Okay, so in summary, how can you wrap this up for us?
Well, in summary, a lump sum contract bears a higher risk for the contractor, with the upside of being, fully in charge of all the aspects of the project and potentially a higher profit margin. Okay. A reimbursable contract is a lower risk engagement for the contractor because the client takes on more responsibilities, but these contracts usually result in a lower profit margin for the contractor. So, depending on which contractor you talk to and what their experience has been in the past, some appreciate and or prefer a lump sum contract. Others say, nope, we prefer doing a reimbursable because our risk profile is a lot more manageable than it is when you do a lump sum project.
Thank you so much. And thank you for digging into some of the thinking that you have to do as you make your decision, because it's very complicated, but it's very interesting. This is a complicated, important subject. I think it's also very interesting. Students could think about this as part of, it would make an interesting life's work, really, to get extremely good at doing this, I think. Hopefully with Frank's help, we've cleared the underbrush a little bit and helped you understand some basic concepts about how you choose reimbursable or lump sum contracting in this kind of business. Thank you, Frank. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right.
Anytime. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. Bye.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.